First take of bad announcement that I won't use starting now. Hi.
See, I always
got it out of the way.
I get my part down. When you go, Richard, I go, howdy.
Ha! Wrong.
Welcome to Mount Rushmore. I'm Jeff, and as always, I'm joined by my good friends Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
This time we are joined again by my co-judge and sibling, Sam. How's it going, Sam?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm very good because we've got a very lively category, and this is the Mount Rushmore of albums you listened to as a child and no frontin'.
By the way, Sam has been locked in this room all week.
Yep. He's
waiting for the next episode to show up. It's a little cruel for you. It's a little cruel for you to do that to your brother.
Did we leave enough food for you? I saw you've been chewing on your arms.
I prefer the dry rather than the wet, actually.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll get nothing and like it. So whose choice was this?
This was my choice, and I'm interested in kind of what makes a person into the music lover that they are.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder what is the first thing that you get into and you're like, okay, and it's kind of, does that color your current music choices, or did that completely, is it the opposite of what, is it the things that you're like, you rejected once you turned into a rotten teenager? Or is it something that you're like kind of built upon for the rest of your life?
Are these that seminal? Because the music choices that we had as young people were usually it's an analog media of some kind. It's a tape. Maybe it's a CD. I don't know what age range.
Vinyl. Mine will be vinyl.
Yeah.
Mine were all tapes.
And you didn't have access to all the music like young people do now. So these things were on repeat for a while, weren't they?
I think that was part of it too.
You couldn't just go on Spotify.
Yeah.
There were set
the biggest
offerings.
thing.
It wasn't like a bunch of value menu things. It was like, this is what you're going to listen to.
Yeah, these were, for the most part, these were like 4 albums that I listened to until the tape basically broke.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you kind of had to, in many cases, you had to put faith into the album when you bought it, because you only maybe knew 1 song or 2 songs from the album. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like today where you can go through in Spotify and just, or iTunes and get a sample at least of all the songs before you say if you purchase it on iTunes. Mm-hmm. Most albums, maybe you knew 1 or 2 songs and you thought, oh, those 2 songs sound good enough. I'll give the rest of the album a shot.
And we don't know your choices yet, but in some cases, so I am older brother to Sam, and he may have acquired some music that I left behind. I know his mom is a real prolific collector, so they may have been inherited versus purchased.
Sure, oh sure.
So,
All those Frankie Yankovic
accordion albums.
Polka, 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 as Jeff always said,
So yeah, and not even getting to what music does for you in terms of sending you in certain intellectual directions or opening your horizons or teaching you about life, and you can make assumptions as a young person about what this album that you have represents about the world. This is also kind of, maybe all of us were listening on analog players in which you couldn't really so easily skip forward to the other thing. You had to kind of listen to the old album.
Right, yeah.
So you had to suffer through some questionable tracks for some good ones. So.
Can I add a little thing? I think it's interesting also that the wholeness, the package of the CD or tape or album or whatever it is exactly from like a business standpoint what iTunes was going after, trying to like disaggregate that bunch of just ever increasing value that Best Buy or the record label or whatever was assigning to this because they knew you were in prison. To having to listen to all this, so they could make it $11 and then $14 and then $17 or whatever it was, and it became more and more unacceptable to everybody. So sort of the beauty of that package was also the nightmare of having to
it was a marketing delivery system.
Yeah, and to know that Bobby Brown couldn't stay sober long enough to record 12 tracks, and that you were in fact like listening to My Prerogative for just like the second time within that same album or whatever it is, and that we all just had to eat it or figure out how to make a mixtape with pause on 2 tape decks or whatever it was.
Like, now you're getting into maxi single territory, by the way, with the 7-inch remix, the dance remix, the club remix,
all of it. Milk it.
Well, let's get it going. Michael chose it. Richard, you start it.
All right, so I'm going to go, and Michael and I discussed this before the show because
there's so much collusion here. What's going on?
Well, we're living together now.
Oh, that's hot.
So no, because I just wanted to clarify, because I know we've talked about this on the show before, that my older brother, I think kind of maybe similar to you guys, was my kind of gateway into music. So it was hard for me to think about the stuff I was listening to, let's say in middle school, or even early junior high that wasn't the stuff that was just his albums that he had laying around that I would listen to. So this is all stuff I'd say probably 83 to 86. So it would have been, 4th to 6th grade probably.
Okay.
So the first one is Synchronicity by the Police. And I actually have proof that I had this, was a Police fan, because I have a newspaper clipping of me from when I was like 11. We took a class field trip to the local recycling center to go give in all of our, soda bottles and cans that we'd collected. And there's a picture of me in the local newspaper in my Synchronicity t-shirt with my fake members only jacket on top of it, getting paid my 38 cents or whatever I got for my soda cans that I brought in.
If you could travel in time as that child to any bar in Los Feliz, you would be the hipsterest hipster there.
I know. I would not have even gotten carded, I don't believe. Also, I also had a full beard and mustache by that point. Italian, Mexican was already allowed.
Well, when you said to prove it, was there any question?
Well, in case you guys were thinking I was fronting.
That's right.
There's no fronting.
There's no fronting.
Yeah.
No frontage.
I could have been fronting, but I'm not. Because it does sound like one of those ones like, oh man, I was like 11. I was listening to the Police.
Yeah.
It sounds shady as shit, right?
Although I will tell you, I saw the Synchronicity tour.
Yeah.
I was alive and there and doing it. And I remember thinking the Police were over by then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they hated each other by then.
They hated each other, but also it just felt like the beginning of Sting's career to me.
Yeah, because it was so different. In hindsight, it was so different than
Regatta de Blanc, Zenyatta.
So many of those other albums. Yeah.
It didn't seem what it had done is they'd actually found a sound that evolved past punk meets reggae.
Right.
And so it was cool. It was musical evolution, and it was it's still a great album.
What's funny is I re-listened to it, and it's a very good album. I don't think it's a great album, actually. I think it's not even close to the Police's best album.
Co-judge, let it be known that he's, I guess this is an objection? Is that what it is?
I'm objecting to my own
Sustained.
pick. Okay.
I'm objecting to my own pick.
I will say that
I'm out of order.
If I can
My whole
object,
system's out of order.
a frontin objection.
Okay.
A frontin. That I think you're really trying to claim that you were like an early recycler.
That's also true. Well, it was state enforced or city enforced.
Was it?
Well, it was a school project, school thing.
Okay.
Because we came from such a dirt poor town that's how we ran.
That's
the school.
when it was called salvage still. Or it was
Wow.
just like redemption.
Was this newspaper recycling?
No, it was like
bottles and
sodas
cans?
and cans.
Just
Stuff like
clap
that.
your hands?
I think it was like something where they're trying to do hey, it's good for the environment to do it. So everyone for a month, and we'll go to the recycling center, which was a cool as shit field trip anyway.
We had the
Because you got to see stuff get crushed.
Now
they showed you the whole thing.
And homeless people.
We didn't have homeless people in my town. It was a farming community. We just fed them into the thresher for food for the
Just
cows.
lived in the silos.
Exactly.
in elementary school, we had like newspaper recycling drives where each like homeroom would like gather up the most newspapers you could, and you were judged by it. And I remember like you could always tell when like the rich people came along, because they must have had these huge garages full of newspapers.
Well, they read like the New York Times.
Yeah, that they got every day, and it's like, oh yeah, we know them. They live up on the hill, and they get the newspaper.
Oh, the Financial
every day.
Times. Oh, what's the pound at today, Timmy?
Variety.
Look at these big city slickers with their newspapers that don't have colors in them.
Do you have a favorite song from that album? Or something that like is just so
personal favorite would be Synchronicity too, because it and partially it is something that's completely sounds way different than the rest of the album.
Another suburban family morning, grandmother screaming at the wall. We have to shout above the din of our restless day. We can't hear anything.
I think what you're alluding to, Jeff, is I think Sting found a sound that was bigger and more populist, if you will, sort of a musical, a way to kind of blend what he was doing earlier in his career with more of an arena ready sound.
Yeah.
And Synchronicity is this loud, kind of metally, discordant, very reverby thing that I think for a lot of reasons, that's probably why I think it holds up better than a lot of the songs on that album. And when I was researching this, I went and looked back, and man, 83, I mean, it's one of the biggest albums maybe of all time, right? We It's not even the biggest album of that year, because that's the year that Thriller came out. So it's like, I remember that as a kid. Like, I didn't own Thriller, but I owned
Synchronicity.
Just, starting my career of being a know-it-all douchebag very early on.
You're very successful in it, too.
Hey, do what you love is what I say. But yeah, that year.
Do what you love. I'm sorry.
That year, the albums that were top the charts, there's only like 8 of them. It was Men at Work, Business as Usual. Then it was Thriller. Then it was the Flashdance soundtrack for 2 weeks. And then it was Thriller again.
Wow.
Then it was Synchronicity for like 8 weeks. And then it was Thriller again.
You can't kill Thriller. He keeps coming back like a zombie.
And then it was Synchronicity for like another 8 or 9 weeks. Then it was Mental Health by Quiet Riot.
Yes.
Can't Slow Down by Lionel Richie. And then Thriller again. So I do remember that everyone was in total Michael Jackson phase in 1983.
There's almost like layers of rock where you pinpoint like at what point you actually bought Thriller, like where in
Sedimentary,
there
yeah. You can go through the fossil records and see how much of Michael Jackson's nose is left, and you can actually trace it from that. But it's in terms of being just an album that I think to me was one of the first albums that I got into that felt maybe a little bit not quite pure pop music. Although now that I look back on it, it's like, no, it was pretty damn poppy and pretty, for everybody. So,
well, it's a thing. It's important too. And I grew up with sort of U2 early 90s when they were really trying, and I think on the like album Pop, it didn't work, but like Zooropa and Achtung Baby, like they were trying to go more electronic, see what could happen. And the one thing about Sting is like, whether you like it or not, or Fields of Gold sounds like Muzak, even the non-Muzak version of it.
Yeah.
He was always trying, and even like the sort of the effort to bring in reggae within a British band that had a good-looking frontman who played the bass. For God's sake, like just every aspect of it was a little off, so you sort of had to give him at least a golf clap for all of it.
There's an Onion article that I remembered from a few years ago that was, "Hey, I used to be cool once" by Sting.
Yep.
And it was like about him being like in some sort of store and he heard Stuck in the 50s or it was like some song like from one of the early albums. And he's like, wow, this is kind of great. It's kind of punk, but kind of reggae. This is really interesting. Then it turned out it was by me. So.
Well, and he was a school teacher, so sort of everything was gravy beyond school teacherness.
Winfield, you're up.
My first pick is the 1980 album Chipmunk Punk by the Chipmunks.
Finally, we were all thinking it.
I call definitely not fronting on that one.
I think he might be a little bit fronting. I don't know. We'll see.
I love this album.
Was this the European import or the American?
The maxi single.
Did you have this on 24K?
No, I had it on cassette tape. All of the albums that I listened to, I had on cassette tape. I don't remember them being on like a record player. I think my sister had a record player, and that was about it. I don't think I had it. But Chipmunk Punk was an album that, one, has 0 punk songs on the album.
Absolutely.
It's all new wave. It's all like 30%, 33% of the album is by the Knack. They're all covers of just other new wave songs.
I saw the Knack.
Let's Go by the Cars, Good Girls Don't by the Knack, How Do I Make You by Linda Ronstadt, Refugee by Tom Petty.
Linda Ronstadt?
Frustrated by the Knack. Side 2, Call Me by Blondie. We'll get back to that in a sec. You May Be Right by Billy Joel. Crazy Little Thing Called Love by Queen. And then to finish it off, My Sharona by the Knack.
Wow.
But this is an album that I can't hear the real version of the songs.
Yes.
I'm imagining the Chipmunk versions of the songs.
Yeah,
as you even say them.
Yeah, Good Girls Don't. 100%. If you were to ask me to play that song in my head, it's the Chipmunks version.
Yeah. I guess the story behind how this album came out is that some DJ in San Francisco had, as a joke, played Call Me by Blondie on like double speed. The new release by the Chipmunks. Then people started to call in and request it. Then people started to go call into like record stores and saying, "Hey, do you have the new Chipmunks album?"
It was actually it was KMET, the mighty KMET,
okay,
94.7 here in Los Angeles.
Oh, and then in LA, in LA, then.
Because we're cooler than you guys.
So the guy, I guess it wasn't the guy from the Chipmunks. It was like his son, because the guy that
Bagdasarian.
Ross Bagdasarian.
He had died, and this was their first like release since 1969 of new material. But this is the album that I just, a lot of these I was too young to understand what they were singing about. You know, Good Girls Don't Buy the Knack is basically about sex. I mean, all the songs are about sex.
Yeah.
Call Me is about male prostitution. So I know.
Refugee is about sex with refugees.
But like this song, like this album in particular is super kitsch, but you know, aimed at kids, kind of. It's a little subversive, kind of. But I love this album to pieces.
Did you have an awareness of the actual songs that they were?
Not until I was much older. Not until I started listening to like K-Rock.
Was it
and you start hearing all of these songs on like, you know, Flashback Lunch.
Do you think the musicality of the songs was any of the appeal, or was it the high-pitched voices and the fact that, did you see an image of the Chipmunks or animation or anything that made you?
No, I think they were pretty much blurred. I think this kind of started them a few years later. You know, they had like a Chipmunks cartoon, and they do basically the same thing where they'd cover other pop songs in like a Chipmunk style, and it was kind of like the rebirth of.
It became a big deal. I remember them doing like Wooly Bully and like all these different songs.
Yeah,
they
and
like
they
went through as many as they could for a while.
So it was, I don't know if it was just like part of like that weird kind of comedy rock thing that happened with like, you know, Weird Al.
It must have been on played on Dr. Demento a lot. I'm guessing. Dr. Demento, we got a new song.
Wind up your radios.
I empathize because I had a Care Bears record that had a Care Bears birthday breakdance rap.
Way to ruin my next choice, by the way. God damn it.
And I played it when I was DJing the other night at a hip spot in Culver City.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they loved it. They ate it up.
That's
that was
incredible.
From Zapp and Roger and Ghost Town DJs right into...
It's funny because, like, you know, being an adult now, I look down upon... like the
you look down on a lot of stuff.
Sure.
He's also 7'8". Yes or no?
But like the Chipmunks movies that just came out, and like the versions that they've done of like pop song. This is the same sort of thing, but I guess they're probably a little more.
Trolls had a huge hit,
commercial about
but
it.
They weren't singing in novelty voices, but they were kind of juvenilized pop music, right?
I don't know about that. I mean, I was just thinking of like the actual Chipmunks.
Do you know they're not real? Jeff saw him on tour in '83.
That's true.
I did.
I think part of it is it just that the songs that they're now doing are like sort of disposable pop songs. So it's not quite as funny as like doing like a Cars song or something.
Yeah, they're not
about sex.
They're not covering like Arcade Fire or anything that would be like.
That'd be great. I'd like to hear that.
I would like to hear the Chipmunk version of.
Every time you close your eyes.
Where would I go, please? Where do guys go?
The central joke also of the Chipmunks just being sped up and like that they've now there are MP3s out of the things like slowed down appropriately.
I was going to bring that up.
Clearly,
it's very strange
singing. Yeah,
the slowed down version is kind of super creepy, where you hear them
demonic.
Singing. Yeah,
like it's yeah.
Well, what's a fun choice? And it does speak. Did you go and seek this album? Was it given to you as a gift?
I have no recollection. It's just like Darth Vader. It's always been in my life.
Okay, I don't know if that's fronting, but it's questionable. Okay, Darth Vader has always been in my life.
Is Darth Vader fronting?
I have you now.
Is he your father?
Richard, what is your second choice?
My second choice is the album Big Bam Boom by Hall & Oates.
What is it?
Big Bam Boom by Hall & Oates.
Okay.
Have you heard of Hall & Oates? Are you familiar with their oeuvre?
You wrote Big Bang Boom, but it says
it's actually Big Bam.
Big Bam Boom. Oh, but am I saying? I'm saying
which is it, Richard? Clarify it.
Like big and then like Bam, like Bam Bam Bigelow.
This is Hall with Oates. Okay.
Yes. This is
featuring Oates.
Also Oates. FT Oates.
This would be the last album that they made that people gave a shit about.
Oh, okay.
Basically. So this is the one that's got Out of Touch on it. And Method of Modern Love.
Yeah.
So this is again, it's 84. So it's right before they started. Right before I think the commercial taste started to shift, and they tried to get sort of almost new wave to kind of adapt to that.
Yeah.
Except it's 1985, and they're trying to get sort of more new wave, and that's already 3 years past its sell by date.
Mm-hmm.
So they wind up getting to that point where they're kind of struggling to figure out how do you sound relevant.
Blue Eyed Soul seemed outdated.
Yeah, and particularly with two white guys, that look like them, like Hall and Oates.
Yeah.
Which I guess would be Blue Eyed Soul.
I will say that I don't know if you recall.
Well, not even like just that they're white, that they're fucking Hall and Oates.
Was this the album? One album, I think it was a video. Daryl Hall, I think, had a shirt that said 1984.
I think that might have been Adult Education, which is
I saw them perform in concert.
Of course you did, Jeff.
He wore
God
that.
Damn it.
He wore that shirt. And a roadie or somebody had taped a piece of black gaff tape through the 1984 because it was clear that it wasn't. This was 1985.
He's in 85.
It was just kind of like maybe they don't have that much money either. That's what I thought at the time.
And that they had a copy editor for their
shirts. Was it like the red, sort of like swirly one?
Yeah.
But
See me after class.
yeah, this is of course featuring the loathsome G.E. Smith on electric guitar.
Yeah.
I don't know if he actually is or isn't, but he just has the type of face that you want to punch.
Yeah, it's Jack Palance's uglier son.
With straight, long, stringy hair.
Gilda Radner married him though, so he couldn't have
really?
all that.
Yeah,
Right.
before Gene Wilder. Yeah, because apparently she had a thing for guys with shitty hair. I don't know. But I remember buying this because I had really liked, Hall & Oates was like the shit in the early 80s. And that was probably the first soul music I was really exposed to, maybe like Motown type stuff. And I do think I got this album. Oh, by the way, track 1, instead of track 1, it's side bam, and track 2 is side boom. That's a sign you're doing a lot of cocaine, guys. But I do think this is the first album that I got and I was vaguely disappointed by.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because the 2 singles, those are really good songs. There's not a lot of other really good songs on this album going back and listening to it. So I think this was the first time I ran into that sort of, I like these first 2 songs, I'll go get the album. And then it was like, oh, I could have just got the 2 singles, saved myself about $10 and done the same thing.
Had you said you were into soul, or you had listened to soul, had you listened to some of their albums and their previous albums had realized they were changing their sound?
I don't think I had. I think I'd listened to previous albums. I'd have to go back and check what the previous albums were. Let me do that real quick. Well, the last one was H2O, which had like Maneater, 101, Family Man. That was like a really stacked album. So I think I just think this was a 2-song album. Mm-hmm. And when you're, whatever I was, 10 at the time.
Yeah.
And that's like 2 weeks worth of allowance to buy a record.
Yeah.
And it's got 2 decent songs. It's especially disappointing.
Mere decades later, Napster came to liberate you from the tyranny of the 2-song album.
Thank God Napster's still around. Wait, what? Just getting word here.
So, Michael, what's your second choice?
My second one. I'm glad you brought up being disappointed.
Mm-hmm. I do frequently, but when I talk with you, go ahead.
My next album is 1983's Hearts and Bones by Paul Simon.
Oh dear.
Which is just so dad rock and boring, and I don't know why.
1 1/2 Wandering Jews is the opening song to really grab you.
No, it's Allergies, which is like this kind of up-paced. It's just like this really, like it's the most energetic.
Allergies.
It's the most energetic.
I'm sorry, I'm Jewish, and that's like the most Jewish opening track. It's like runny nose and.
You think you could do this is good? Hey, that was the B-side.
Yeah, Allergies.
My
Hearts
Toe
and
Hurts
Bones
is on there too.
When Numbers Get Serious, Think Too Much, Song About the Moon.
How much did this cost?
Oh, there's 2 versions of Think Too Much on there, by the way.
Train and Distance, Renee and Georgia Magritte and Their Dog After the War, which, good Lord. No one wants to hear a song about that.
Was this
Cars Are Cars, which is, it was like, it's funny. Like I had this and I don't know if I bought it. I might've bought it cause my parents were listening to Paul Simon. So it was like, okay,
it's a bonding thing.
I want the newest Paul Simon, but it was like in his post concert in Central Park where he was supposed to be teaming up with Garfunkel again. Mm-hmm. And then like always, it kind of fell apart.
Mm-hmm. Is this pre or post Graceland?
This is pre,
right?
This is pre Graceland. This is before like all the world music kind of kicked in, and he kind of, maybe this is what sent him on his way to kind of listen to something that's,
which I would argue was kind of a Sting move, like in terms of just like I'm going to take a hard turn here, like something where he was like really trying, versus going in.
But this, I hadn't listened to this album since I was a kid, and I went back and listened to it on Apple Music, and it was just like, wow, I don't know why I listened to this so much.
Did this try to go a little new wave? I'm looking at the album cover and he looks fucking new wave as hell here. Skinny tie.
He does. Like if you
pink
look at
shirt with a blue collar.
If you look at the cover of Chipmunk Punk, which you just mentioned, very similar. Another skinny tie standing against some wall background.
Right.
But only one song, that first song, Allergies, would be kind of upbeat. I keep coming back to it because that's the one I remember. Everything else was so kind of slow and kind of that boring Paul Simon stuff.
It reminds me of that documentary Jesus Camp, where there's like this 7-year-old who's like, I just realized that I needed to get my life together and it seems like you got this album because you knew you needed to like settle down. It was time to like get serious with some serious music.
He was into
like,
his
really
40s.
get into
He
a
was
good
into his
relationship.
40s and had to explore, like the last song in the album is the late great Johnny Ace, and he kind of had to explore the big moments of his life, you know, in the 60s. And it was almost like
music for midlife crisis.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the Phil Collins, solo albums and stuff.
Yeah.
It was the year of the Beatles, it was the year of the Stones, the year after JFK. We were staying up all night and giving the days away. And the music.
Did this add to your vocabulary as a young person of identifying what you dislike and why? Do you recall just having a general anger at this album, or did you think, I know why this is bad?
Well, I remember listening to this one a lot, and then when Graceland came out.
Which, by the way, I will jump in, even though it's not technically my choice. That's one of my choices.
Is it? Okay.
Yes. So I felt like we should just turn it into the Paul Simon cast for a little bit. Yeah.
I love that album too. But when I thought of this category, this is the one that that came up for whatever reason. It's either haunted me or it's like reminded me of like sometimes you don't listen to great albums. I listened to stuff on here and I was like, I don't remember any of these. I wonder if I fast forwarded through them a ton or just.
I remember hearing just Renee and go no, like it was just like, so just like
like I remember Hearts and Bones a bunch and Cars Are Cars just because it was like the only other thing that was faster than 5 beats a minute.
Yeah, and before that was the last album he'd done before that was the movie One Trick Pony. It's a soundtrack to that, which has
Late in the
flop.
Evening on it, though,
but it has a couple of good songs. But the movie itself was a giant flop. And then Hearts and Bones comes out. And I think he just gotten divorced from Carrie Fisher, right? I think somebody help me out here.
No, he was.
Or who was he to just get divorced from? Somebody
before Edie Brickell.
Well, we can let's transition into Graceland because the last. Well, do we want to do the
halftime?
Yeah, let's do the halftime.
You know, you're probably on iTunes right now. You just downloaded the podcast. You may be a fan of music, you may be out poking around, and you may wonder, what is this Mount Rushmore thing? And we still don't know. It's taken us like 60 episodes to try to figure it out. But we want you to like it, and so we want you to tell us what you like about them. So go to the old episodes, download, rate, and review. Let us know what you think about the new episodes. Let us know what episodes you might like to hear topics discussed. You can join us on Facebook at Mount Rushmore Podcast.edu, and you can follow us on Twitter at intellectualassholes.net.
And you can find us on Napster if you want it for free versus having to pay for it for free on iTunes.
You can find me on Tinder.
You can find me in the club.
I'm Hirsute North Hollywood boy. You can find me on Grindr. I'm within 5 feet of you. Where are you standing? If you put on the geographic search.
Look out the window.
Look out the window. I'm right there. That's me waving. Can you see me? I'm waving. This is the end of this thing, and now we're back. And
so you were in the middle of Simon Cast, and I did look this up while you were doing whatever that thing you do, Jeff. I don't know what it is, but and he actually Hearts and Bones was right when he first got married to Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, and then
Graceland's like right after they get a little bit after they get divorced.
Yeah, I think one of the songs from Graceland. I think the first
half wandering Jews.
Yeah, is it Asthma? The B-side to Allergies.
The wheezing remix is really great.
The song Graceland, I think, featured lyrics about Carrie Fisher directly.
Right.
And like advice that she'd given him and stuff.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let's agree to disagree, you guys.
I don't know. Are we disagreeing about something? I'm not even sure.
No,
I'm
just getting dismissed entirely.
Let's agree to. Well, that's fine. That's good. That's good information. That's good to know. No, we're
you were the one that couldn't.
We're setting the.
You were the one
stage.
that didn't know when they were married.
Well, I'm sorry that I don't know Paul Simon and Carrie Fisher's personal.
Apology accepted.
There you
guys,
go.
think about the people who are listening.
Why should we start now, Jeff?
Think about the listeners.
So Graceland, I remember, I wouldn't say that I was a huge Paul Simon fan growing up, and it wasn't something that was necessarily in my family. But I very specifically remember seeing him on Saturday Night Live when Graceland came out. And he did Graceland, I think, and Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like something that I'd never heard before.
Ladysmith Black Mambazo.
Yeah, they were backing him up. And,
Amazing.
She's a rich girl, she don't try to hide it. Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. He's a poor boy, empty as a pocket, empty as a
And they touch their shoes for the shoe part. Which
That's how you
is
know.
Amazing. Like in the lyrics.
they're basically they're South Africa's answer to the Pips, I believe. So
What was it you liked? You thought they were
it was
distinctive.
I mean, first off, it's a fantastic album. Just the songs are great, taken apart from any sort of cultural aspect of it. But it might have been the first time being 10 at the time that I'd really been exposed to world music or music that was really outside of the blues rock sort of world. And it was thrilling really to hear something that was just so different.
There's a lot of
worked so well. I mean, that could have been a disaster of an album. Just the idea of take this kind of white folk rock singer and have him go to South Africa and start recording this album that's, influenced by that, influenced by like Zydeco and all this other stuff.
Well, and even the bass player was South African, I think, with that fretless bass.
He was.
There was a lot of, and interesting to that period is that in the midst of, and that was like the heat of apartheid. That was when it was like really getting horrible and like too much to bear, and not playing Sun City, Little Steven. And
hey, I'm not going to play Sun City, you guys.
Yeah, you're done. No way, Jose. But for you and for everybody to have internalized just like the cultural value of the South African, the black experience without having to digest the political message of what was going on was important sort of parallel movement or momentum that he helped to develop. And I think it was...
Yeah, and it's interesting with that album. I mean, there was some criticism of him that this was basically a form of cultural appropriation. Again, the rich white guy comes in, quote unquote, steals a certain type of music. I think he played in like Soweto or played a concert in there, and a lot of people were upset that he kind of broke the ban on artists going to South Africa. But when he did, wherever he played it, it was like basically maybe one of the black sections of Johannesburg. So it was open to everybody. And that was kind of his point that no, we're actually trying to use music to kind of build bridges here.
Yeah.
Paul Simon is this one artist that I'm convinced is never actually playing his guitar when he's on stage playing. He looks like he's
always
like
grabbing the microphone for like several seconds at a time.
The Showbiz Pizza Bears and Paul Simon.
Plus, wasn't Chevy Chase playing the guitar most of that time?
That's right.
For most of the album.
But like I always think of Paul Simon just after like just barely strumming those. I'm like, how is he getting any sound out of that?
There's some guy like off stage, just off to the very side, who's like doing everything, right?
Garfunkel.
Oh, Garfunkel. Yeah.
That's what you didn't see. He was always there. He was always playing. But
When he couldn't sing all those Ladysmith Black Mambazo parts, that's when he got kicked off the album, and they brought in those.
He
guys.
originally tried to do like a Bugs Bunny style thing where he sang all of the parts at once and just multi-tracked it like live. But they said you got to get actual guys in here. Man.
Yeah, there's a cutout version where it's all you hear in the background is just Garfunkel's high, like, instead of the "I mean, my papa." Ooh,
well, they just slowed it down, and
then became the
Chipmunks.
Chipmunks. Basically, the Chipmunks. Yeah, I'm glad we could all.
Well, the thing about the Paul Simon stuff too is that you always get this sense.
Call me out.
Is the darker that was the Hearts and Bones original slowed down version of it, but like that you got a sense also that he genuinely truly liked the music. That was like there was no thing that I'm gonna throw this in here like it's like doing some EDM version for the irrelevant artist, and because there was nobody else that he was grabbing that from. There wasn't like some weird underground. It wasn't like Johnny Rotten was doing some African record, and he was like, I'm going to do my African record too.
He wasn't jumping.
It wasn't derivative really at
yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Like,
I will say that album, it fits into the category of things that I did encounter as a young person and played to death, and that now it feels like finding a photograph of yourself in leg warmers and a members only jacket and maybe like some rainbow suspenders.
So a couple of months go for me.
It does feel like a little bit of a guilty, and it feels kind of embarrassing.
That's interesting to me, because I went back and listened to it and I had a completely opposite reaction.
Really?
I think because it's kind of this fusion of world music, and it still feels fresh to me. And I think, I've seen him do solo shows, where he's, done acoustic type versions of these songs. I think the songs, it works because the songs are still, the bones of the songs are still good.
Wrapped around it, there's like just sort of like the echo or the reflex of listening to it that sort of stays as a memory.
Like when Springsteen plays the acoustic version, you hear the full band because it just feels so compelling or part of the thing.
And last thing I would like to point out at this album is this is certainly maybe on the Mount Rushmore of albums where I don't know what the hell any of the lyrics are really about.
Yeah.
Which is most Paul Simon songs, if we're being honest about it. He is certainly somebody who does not write specifics.
Well, I will tell you, Carrie Fisher only wore shoes with diamonds on both of them.
That's what killed her, actually.
That's what killed her.
People don't know that.
Took a long time. Okay.
Great traction, though. She really never fell down.
Expensive. What's your next and why and where and why?
Mine is an album I probably shouldn't have been listening to, and it was definitely my sister's, and this was Licensed to Ill by the Beastie Boys from 1986. And I like them because I thought their voices sounded funny.
Like the Chipmunks? Were you playing it at the wrong speed,
it might have
possibly?
been. I have a great affection for singers who have kind of weird voices. Like I really like
Geddy Lee,
Tom Waits,
not so much, but like
the guy from
Isaac Brock from Modest Mouse, and someone else is on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think. But I like a weird sounding voice, and
Future Islands guy is a weird voice,
yeah.
Craig Finn.
Yeah.
How about him?
I don't know.
It sounds like he's just talking all the time.
But this album, like, I was so obtuse to what they were singing about. And, like, Brass Monkey is, here's a song about date rape. Like, it's also juvenile. And also, like, it kind of hit that peak of, like, oh, they're singing about funny, weird things. And I don't quite get it. And I don't remember listening to it, like, with my parents around.
Yeah.
Although I don't think that they would have really cared or pointed out all like the horrible nature of it.
Yeah.
It was
so sort of like shticky, and like they're talking about White Castle, and like even they grabbed the piano player and punched him in the face, which is one of my favorite lines in all of music.
From
it's just
Paul
like,
Revere, right?
Yeah, it's just like so over the top.
MCA was with it, and he's my ace, so I grabbed the piano player and I punched him in the face. Piano player's out, the music stopped. His boy had beef, and he got dropped.
Mike D grabbed the money.
MCA snatched the gold. I grabbed 2 girlies and a beer that's cold.
All of it was over the top, and like shticky is a good way to put it. And they were like acting out like these weird roles, and they were, had a mix of kind of rock and roll with Fight for Your Right to Party, and then
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you think they were fronting?
I think they were fronting.
That's what I mean. Do you think they were fronting in that album?
It's hard to. I mean, they had that weird like punk. They had those
'Cause
weird
they were
punk
a punk
roots
band. They were a punk
with like
band
Egg Raid
before
on
that,
Mojo and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but like,
Pollywogs too, yeah.
I don't know. I think that they just lived in New York at the right time.
They were like the children of New York intellectuals. It felt like they were taking an analytical approach. They were
To
celebrating
songs about rape.
They were celebrating what's fun about hip hop and rap, I think, but not trying to distance themselves too far from it. But I do felt like they could step out of some of the places where the original like purveyors of rap couldn't leave. Like, so I almost feel like they were very observational tourists, but who were also performing, I think, genuinely. But yeah.
I just like that they sounded like teenagers.
Yeah.
Like they definitely didn't sound like adults singing songs, like as opposed to Paul Simon, who was very much like an old person.
It sounded so juvenile, but had a fun energy.
Also sounded Jewish. Also another band that sounded pretty damn Jewish.
It did seem like if Jerry
No
Lewis-
allergies song though.
No songs about allergies.
My limited amount of DJing in high school and just high school, we played that to death in the high school radio station, which had the broadcast range of The Cafeteria. But that did speak a lot to white suburbanites and their access to rap and hip hop. So it was like our foot in the pool of that genre.
And rock that wasn't necessarily punk, but that had a different edge to it. Like the fact of sampling AC/DC was like, here's this thing that you know about, but it's taken in this sort of like weird direction, and then drum machines are thrown in. And it was like at least sort of nudging people beyond what they knew, or sort of out of something, even if it wasn't toward, like with Ladysmith Black Mambazo. It doesn't mean that you're going to go buy like all these like South African folk recordings, but it's like at least just planted this seed.
I wonder if it was like weirdly safe for like a white audience to listen to white guys.
How awkward did you go back and re-listen to this lately?
It's
kind of uncomfortable to listen to.
It's kind of bad. But it's amazing how it went from this to Paul's Boutique and just the leaps and bounds that they've made.
And Check Your Head. And
right. Well, they certainly, I don't think they even felt really comfortable with the legacy of that album.
No. I read like an AV Club kind of retrospective about them, and like this album being 30 years old now, which is amazing. It's weird. It's weird to go back and be like, oh my God, this stuff is 3 decades old.
Yeah.
And definitely they've had their reservations about the content of the songs, whether it's She's Crafty or Girls, and just the straight up misogyny and kind of homophobia that kind of is riddled throughout it.
As a listener too, I used to wonder about like the windows of time. Like we'd drive around in the suburbs in high school, sort of looking for trouble, but like listening to the Doors.
There's some fronting in there.
Yeah, a little bit. Looking for trouble. looking for study partners.
Were you looking for love in all the wrong places?
All around Overland Park, Kansas. But like that, we were listening to the Doors, which 30 years afterwards, but wonder were people in the 60s listening to music from the 30s, that there aren't these sort of rolling generations of music. And so to wonder if kids today find anything appealing about the Beastie Boys, sort of that's that same window of time, I don't know if there's any
I've seen high school kids with Beatles shirts on, and I wonder what what is your frame of reference to that?
Parents, grandparents. It's now like passed on like legacy music. It's like folk music or something.
I mean, Ramones is a shirt for most people. I don't know if they know it's a band, but it's got a cool logo.
Oh yeah, you guys from the shirt.
So
well, it's like Hank's like lawn service. It's the distressedness of the shirt more than the sort of the content.
Yeah. Okay, Richard, you're up.
All right, so my last one is, speaking of the Ramones, it's Sports by Huey Lewis and the News.
But what?
I don't know, just felt like go there. But that's the fourth one for me, and this is very specific for me because this wound up becoming my mom's favorite album. Like, this was the album that, she played this thing constantly, but it was my album. She basically took it over.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing.
No. It's fine. It's just funny to me. It was funny to me too at the time. I think Huey Lewis was the approved sort of rock dreamboat for every like middle-aged white wife. In somewhere in either the Midwest or Central California or somewhere like that.
There are 3 like LP album covers that I remember the most, very specifically growing up. One of them was the Go-Go's, the one where they're all covered in like makeup and they're
So we got the beat, right?
Probably.
Beauty and the Beat. Is that it?
Another one was.
I guess you don't remember that well if you don't know the name of it.
Like visually. I remember that. Musical Youth for Pass the Ducci. It was just the album cover with these, all the guys on the front. And then the third one was Sports.
Right.
Just visually, like I think back, and all those 3 were in my house, and whether they're my dad's or my sister's.
Let's discuss how lazy that album title is for a second. Sports. Not like there's a song on there called Sports, or there's any tracks that involve sports.
Mm-hmm. What is the genesis? I wonder.
It's just called Sports.
Are they, as individuals, there are some young men who are very sporty?
No, I wouldn't say that necessarily.
Or just a brilliant marketer who's just like,
sports.
Yeah,
there's a word that people like, blue.
Right.
Just like,
blue. So what something drew your mother to this? Did you when you found she liked it?
I think she had a thing. Well, I bought it first.
Okay,
and then I think she just had a thing for Huey Lewis, and it was very kind of. It was the type of music where if you're 10 or 11, however old I was, I guess I was younger than that. I guess it was like 8. It's the type of album that I think when you're 8 or 9 or 10, it was the type of rock that was easy for you to process, and it had, stuff like, harder rock and roll. They weren't very complex and challenging songs, let's put it that way. But they're fun songs. And when you're that age, you want fun songs. And when you're 45, 45-year-old woman or however old my mom was, 50 probably at the time, you want kind of fun songs. You're not looking for Patti Smith or something like that,
Yeah. Fun fact too is that Huey Lewis is the only human being ever to be born at age 38, and he's just like locked in place there.
Looking at the album cover, he's got such an amazingly punchable face.
It's really
He just looks smug
The
and
chin is the
Look at
most
that
punchable.
chin.
it's a
You could
bullseye
swing.
right there.
Yeah, if you did swing, you couldn't miss his chin.
No.
It'd
he
be
has
impossible.
skin like a catcher's mitt. I mean, it's like
It does seem like he was probably the easy alternative to things that were a little bit more. If maybe U2 was already being political, or the punk rock was still edgy and dangerous, he was definitely pretty.
Are you questioning my mother's taste in men?
Your mother.
What's
was
happening here?
Your mother's an angel of a woman, and I would never question any of her
angel of the
decisions.
morning. Dude.
So, yeah, I just
my
called
mother
her.
was Juice Newton, everybody, in case you guys don't know.
Okay, so the last one.
My last one is the soundtrack from the movie Stand By Me.
Wow.
1986. I remember entering the 6th grade or the 7th grade, and someone asked me, what kind of music do you listen to? And I made the gigantic mistake of saying oldies. And now, I'd listened to some other stuff. I could have said like the Beastie Boys and rap, but no. I opened my big fat mouth and said oldies. And sure, I listened to K-Earth 101 a fair bit. I grew up with my dad, who grew up in the Beatles generation, and all of these songs from this, they're all very classic 50s songs.
What were the repercussions to this? Did pig's blood fall from the ceiling of the gym or something?
Green slime.
I remember being branded like such a dork.
Yes, that was it, Michael.
No.
It was because of that one choice in music that you were branded
Not
with
the
dork.
suspenders
Thank
and the
you.
saddle shoes.
Listen, I made a lot of terrible choices after that, trying to correct said coolness. I had to have a pair of like Nike Air Max shoes
Oh, okay.
Stab somebody for them.
versus like whatever generic tennis shoes I had. I did own purple parachute pants.
Oh, yes.
I had.
Do they still fit?
No, I wish I had them now. But I remember
They fit regular now. They just be like regular pants.
I remember loving this album and loving every track on this album. And it's short. It's 10 songs. It's, Every Day by Buddy Holly to Stand, Mr. Lee by the Bobettes or whoever.
1, 2, 3. Look at Mr. Lee. 3, 4, 5. Look at him jive. Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. I met my sweetest Lee.
I really love 50s music. I went to the K-Earth 101 Golden Oldies concert at the Universal.
Cool.
Whatchamacallit? Amphitheater before they tore it down or turned it into the whatever Palladium or whatever it was. And
It was the Gibson.
yeah, the Gibson. Thank you. And I remember seeing like the Tokens playing "The Lion Sleeps
cool.
Tonight." Wasn't on the album, but I was so okay and really interested in 50s music. And then I remember that getting like shut out of me. Like after that, I remember like this being like the last thing that I listened to.
It was like your last stand, so to speak.
There you go. But it's funny how like kids can ruin you for just being uncool. And this is the
Kids
album.
are the worst.
They're really the
They're
worst.
fucking
worst.
worst.
But I don't know. It was just like I play this, back to back, and it would just be on repeat.
I
all
did
the time.
enjoy the American Graffiti soundtrack, which was like a double album. And then in high school, I remember the thing that we played for some reason. In high school, I had theater kids at high school theater parties was the Big Chill soundtrack, which was
I was going to mention that.
oldies,
There
yeah.
was like this pocket of like a few years where the oldie soundtracks were
Yeah.
like the big thing. So Stand By Me, Big Chill, Dirty Dancing,
Well, and now I wonder if a kid
Well, La Bamba.
La
came
Bamba.
out.
Yeah.
if a kid likes Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack today, are you an a-hole for that? Kids who are listening, let us know if you're an a-hole.
Our next review. Yes.
Yes.
How do you feel about Sweet?
the sweet Fox on the Run.
I don't know. It was just one of the albums that I felt uncool in the aftermath of like being like, well, that's it.
But then, Stand By Me was sampled within the past like 10 years. There was a song called Beautiful Girl by Sean Kingston, and the entire thrust of it, the whole main line of it is Stand By Me. So there's some like almost visceral response to
God,
that.
I was cool, wasn't I?
Yeah, I mean, it's Lieber and Stoller, who, I mean, it's just like, they knew what they were doing. Like, you were almost being tapped into, like, your brain. They knew how people were programmed.
Right. I I actually find that a little surprising that you caught some shit for that.
I
really find that a little surprising. I don't think that would have happened where I grew up. So maybe that's like a big city versus smaller.
Well, but you said
town
oldies.
thing?
You didn't say as represented on the soundtrack to Stand By Me, which has a switchblade in the movie.
Sure.
But thereby making it all okay.
Yeah, kids with all
I
cool
remember-
teenagers in that movie.
I remember, we had like a sock hop, like a 50 sock hop at our in middle and in junior high, like every year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I don't ever seem to remember there being a stigma about that. That's just, again, I just wonder if that's something like growing up in Los Angeles versus a small town where, we're simpler folk back then.
I mean, I could have.
Wholesome.
The 70s just barely got to us in the 80s, so 50s were still cool. So
Did you have was it 50s music being played, or was it contemporary music played at the sock?
Oh yeah, it said sock opera. It was like 50s and early 60s,
Okay.
and the girls would dress up in poodle skirts that their old mom's old poodle skirts or ones
Oh,
they
wow.
made for him, and the guys try to look like greasers.
Wow, cool. Okay, so these gentlemen have Sam.
By the way, I grew up in Sha Na Na. I failed to mention that, guys. I was the little kid from Sha Na Na.
I love Bowser.
Oh.
Sam and I are going to co-judge, but Sam, I talked to you about this category, and you were kind enough to let me know that some of the music that you acquired in early age. What were they?
So I there's an interesting sort of
I'll decide if it's in
non-interesting, totally boring technological preface, which is that I had my first CD player was a boombox. Jeff had the first CD player that I was aware of, and I remember getting the CDs that were actually like modified to fit the record shelves in the stores. They put long superfluous boxes on them that were 12 inches
long.
long.
Cases, what are they?
You remember that? Yeah. It would be so it was like and you got like the Beatles White Album on CD, but it was actually the size of the Beatles actual White Album. It was absurd. And then the boombox that I had space in the back of it for 4 jewel cases, like in the boombox. And I was like, all right, I got to get 4 CDs, and this is going to be like my collection. So at that time, again, you judge, but the cool, or it seemed like de rigueur CDs to have were Eric Clapton's Unplugged, Michael Jackson Dangerous.
Sure.
And then, so those were the first 2 that my grandma got for me as we bought the boombox itself. And then I asked my brother Jeff for another couple, which to catch up were Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em by a rapper named MC Hammer.
Speaking of parachute pants.
the consummate parachute pants. And then the soundtrack to a movie about a teenager who was frozen in ice and lived in a local town
Harry Potter?
called Encino Man, starring Brendan Fraser and
Louise.
Pauly Shore, who went on to wheeze the juice in front of all of us for many, many years. So those were, and which did cruelly not feature the song "I'm Too Sexy" by Right Said Fred, which was like the focal point of the movie, but instead had like Vince Neil solo cuts, and And so those were memories, and also why I felt compelled. It makes your choice of sort of bummer Paul Simon seem like a Go-Go's or Clash album or something that I bought Eric Clapton Unplugged, I think, for the song Tears in Heaven. Like that I just like needed that in my young life.
What kind of kid were you? That song about his son falling to his death from like 80 floors. Need that one.
That was just like what was on MTV at the time, and I think I just would listen to that and read the Psalms or something like that, and it just
You know what's crazy? The video for that song for Tears in Heaven won like best video of the year.
It was
that
him
was
sitting, keeping himself from crying, like barely holding.
Can you imagine how angry Michael Jackson was for whatever multi-million-dollar extravaganza was spent?
That wasn't the video from the movie Rush, like the Jennifer Jason Leigh, I believe.
And then also, but I think they probably made one like that, but then the dominant one was just a cut from Eric Clapton Unplugged.
Just the Unplugged
all
one.
the Unplugged performances, they basically, like All Apologies, the Nirvana one, that sort of like, dominated everything. I didn't even know that it was on In Utero, and I had In Utero. Like so many of those Unplugged performances became like hit videos. And
just real quick before you guys deliberate and all this stuff, was I the only one who had a boombox in my car that I had put in the passenger seat because we did not have a CD player in the car?
A lot of people, yeah.
A lot of people did that, right? Not just me.
I think I had that.
But you would go through D batteries like crazy.
So much, man.
Oh my God, D cell batteries.
Gentlemen, and I use that term incorrectly, This has been fun, but a decision must be made. And I am just the man to make that decision with another man who shares the same name as my man. And so, gentlemen, we will retire to the judges' quarters, and we will come back in a day, and we will let you know what we choose. But we will fast forward through the day. We are back. We have deliberated. We are back, Robin, and have deliberated. We're back. We've deliberated, and Sam, your judgeness is going to be put on trial here. I want you to judge the shit out of these guys. Okay? Did you find any thematic through lines in Michael's choices?
Yeah, Michael, it seems that you crave really belonging. And I'm not just, I just want to make sure that I am judging you as a human being and not just these choices that you made today.
He's not fronting, you guys.
The bonded, the bond, a connection both to your parents who I'm sure love you very deeply. And ish. So
I've met Michael's dad enough times. One time he showed up at a kickball field just to tell Michael he should call him more often, and then left. And anyway, go on.
My dad has been to 2 of my games altogether. That's it.
You know it's rough when your dad yells, "Get the bat off your shoulder," and it's a kickball game. You're like, "Come on, Dad." But the both an attempt to connect different songs to each other and through the format of a compilation or soundtrack, and to sort of get a nice ready-made delivery of oldies or of high pitched to awful new wave music, just to make sure that you had that sort of in your arsenal, and
trying to bond with the kids
at school.
Yeah,
and then also to get something because you wanted to know all the lyrics to Renee and Georgette Magritte and The Dog After the War to connect with your parents and force them to love you. These are some themes that came out on the podcast couch here. So that was interesting. Jeff,
I don't know about interesting.
It emerged.
It emerged.
Yes, neutrally.
Richard, what do
Hold
you think?
on a second. Before you guys do that, I need to check to make sure that my insurance covers this type of therapy. So let me
Not anymore.
Call to my HMO and
Check that.
Thanks, Trump.
The deductible is going to be your main hurdle there.
This podcast is a pre-existing condition. Go on.
Richard, I think that you like seeing people break free of the strictures of a genre that they had even as a Freddie Mercury type has articulated so well.
To break free.
That they want to take things to the next level. That you appreciate that artistic
unshackling.
willingness, the unshackling of a young Gordon Sumner from his. From Stuart Copeland and his traditional jazz, left-hand snare grip, and that there's that theme even with sports, potentially also an interesting, if we're into the psych world and on the therapist's couch, you obviously have a lot of insight into your mother's taste in men from everything that we've heard. So, but that overall you like people who break momentum, and
You can't even front with this guy.
There's no fronting. That's rearing is what's happening. Bad rearing.
who get away from their musical father. You could say so. So these were themes: musical transformation in general, and a desire for education about other genres, other places in the world, as it were, with the South African artists being brought into Paul Simon's Graceland.
So what about points? We could say these guys with zero fronting as the policy have just merely presented us with these choices, and is it fair for us to really judge them? Or could we judge based on amount of fronting that we think might have happened? Also...
Jeff, I forgot to mention Matthew's Sweet album should have been one of mine.
Oh, shit. Okay. Yeah, Richard is the winner.
100% front.
Front. So in doling out some points, I will say what I was very, very much admired is the amount of emotion that Michael brought to his choices. A lot of his choices were painful.
Openly weeping.
Yeah, because they usually had as a sidecar some personal rejection that he received from the people who he admitted to. And I know I've rejected him personally based on his choices. So
it's been a breakthrough podcast in a lot of ways.
So his fear of chipmunks. He's probably figured out where that came from.
So I have point for Chipmunk Punk.
Yeah,
I think. So 1 for Winfield. And I think a point for sports by Huey Lewis and the News. So one for Mrs. and Son.
Is that a
Manfredi.
point or like a run or a touchdown or?
It's a carved face on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Huey Lewis's
You-
chin, you need extra carving.
What you don't know, Sam, is after this that you have to go and actually go and carve it out of a mountain. So
the San Gabriel Mountain.
Yeah. I also think Paul Simon reared his head very prolifically in this. So I think
He was actually sneezing from allergies. I think.
Yeah.
It was-
I would say point for Paul Simon for each of them. They each
That
get a
is
Simon.
Hold on. I just figured something out, guys.
Beautiful.
First, the first song from, well, not One Trigger, was the one you had, Heart and Bones?
Hearts and Bones.
Allergies. First song from Graceland, Boy in the Bubble. There's something happening here, guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait a minute.
Shots was the first.
His immune system, I'm very concerned about his
Well, I'm
immune
looking up the
system.
song for Rhythm of the
Alvin and
Saints.
Alvin
Hearts
and
and Bones, the baby in the baboon heart.
Alvin and the Chipmunks. Alvin, Theodore, and who?
Alvin,
my goodness.
Simon, Theodore.
Oh, man.
I got to look up sports and see if there's a person named Simon. And
Or Garfunkel. Or that Huey Lewis.
this is a bad pod if I'm pausing to look up anything.
Huey Levinson. As he used
Okay.
to be called.
So,
So
they
how
each-
many points are we at?
So we've
Two
issued
each, right?
we've
Yeah, it's
issued 2 each.
So
Okay,
draw.
fuck it, it's a tie. That's
So
how sports
now
is.
it's a thumb war to settle.
Yeah.
And that's on the
Now it's-
new YouTube channel.
Indian leg wrestling,
Indian
just
leg-
like they did in Stand By Me.
So this has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. I have been Jeff.
I have and continue to be Sam.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.